Okay, I think this is installment 8, and I've got a picture to start it with. He banged it with all his might against the face of the rock. So that's the picture from what I read at the very end of the last one. Kind of gives you an idea where we're starting. We all scrambled around looking for an opening or crevice to work on. Scratching at the foot of the slab, Jip made the discovery that led to success. "Doctor," he cried, "the slab is only resting on a bed of soft earth. It's easy digging. If we scratch the earth from under, the slab might drop and the Indians can climb over the top." "You're right," the doctor said, examining the earth bed. "Let's get at it." The whole crew squatted, scratching and burrowing at the foot of the mountain, and after about an hour, the doctor said, "Be ready to jump from under if the slab falls." Suddenly, there was a grating, grinding sound. "Look out," yelled the doctor. "Scatter, here she comes." The big rock slid down about a foot. There were no signs of a cave within, but we heard human voices. Then suddenly, with a roaring crash that shook the whole mountain range, the slab struck the earth and cracked in half. We saw the black mouth of a 20-foot-high tunnel, and in the center stood a handsome, 7-foot-tall man, slim and muscular, wearing a beaded cloth about his middle and an eagle's feather in his hair. He held one hand up to shield his face from the blinding sun. "It is he, doctor whispered. "I know by his great height and the scar on his chin." He stepped forward across the fallen stone, his hand outstretched to Long Arrow. The Indian uncovered his eyes. Slowly he raised his right arm and took the doctor's hand in his. It was a great moment. The doctor tried to speak, but Long Arrow knew no English, and the doctor knew no Indian. He tried several animal languages, but Long Arrow did not know them. And finally he came to the language of the eagles. "Great Long Arrow," he said in a fierce screams and short grunts that the big birds use, "never have I been so glad in all my life as I am today to find you still alive." In a flash, Long Arrow's face lit with a smile of understanding. In the eagle tongue he replied, "Mighty friend, I owe my life to you. For the rest of my days I am your servant." And here's a picture, you guys. And it says under the picture, "It was a great moment." And I just moved the camera, I'm sorry. The doctor signaled to Bumpo, who came forward with nuts and water. Excuse me. Long Arrow didn't eat any. He nodded his thanks to Bumpo and carried the food and water into the cave. We followed. Inside were 9 other Indians, men, women, and boys lying on the rock floor, thin and exhausted. Quickly the doctor went around listening to their hearts. All were alive, but one woman was so weak she could not stand up. The doctor sent Chi-Chi and Polynesia into the jungle for more fruit and water. Suddenly we heard a sound outside the cave. Clustered at the entrance was the band of Indians we had met on the beach that morning. They peered into the dark cave cautiously, and as soon as they saw Long Arrow and the others, they came rushing in, laughing with joy. Long Arrow explained to Dr. Dolittle that the Indians with him were 2 families who had come into the mountains to help gather medicinal plants. While they were searching for a special plant that only grows inside damp caves, the great rock slab had slid down and trapped them. For 2 weeks they lived on the medicinal moss and any fresh water that dripped inside the cave. The Indians on the island mourned them all as dead. Long Arrow told the other Indians that the doctor and his friends had freed their relatives. They gathered around John Dolittle, talking and beating their breasts in apology for their attitude that morning. Since then, travelers to Spider Monkey Island tell me that the stone slab is a regular sight the Indian guides show. Their story of how it got there is that when the doctor found that his friend Long Arrow was trapped inside the cave, he was so angry he ripped the mountain in half with his bare hands to get him out. The Indians were very nice to us. We were invited to their village for a feast in honor of the rescue of the lost families and Long Arrow. And on the way down the mountain, the Indians told Long Arrow something that appeared to be sad news. The doctor asked what was wrong. Long Arrow said the chief of the tribe had died that morning. "What did he die of?" the doctor asked. "The cold," Long Arrow sighed. We were all shivering as the sun set. "This is quite serious," the doctor said to me. "If nothing can be done, the Indians might have to take to their canoes and abandon the island. Otherwise, they might freeze to death from the Antarctic ice." We came to the top of the hills. Down on the far side of the island was the village, a large cluster of grass huts and brightly colored totem poles near the edge of the sea. How artistic, the doctor said. What is the name of the village? Popsipetel, said Long Arrow, which is also the name of the tribe. In our language, it means men of the moving land. There are 2 tribes on the island, the Popsipetels at this end and the Bag-Jagderags at the other. Which one is larger? By far the Bag-Jagderags, said Long Arrow, as a frown darkened his handsome face. But I would take 1 Popsipetel over 100 Bag-Jagderags. When told how the strange visitor had made the rescue, the entire village gathered around the doctor, shaking his hands and patting his back. They lifted him on their strong shoulders and carried him down the hill into the center of the village. The welcome there was even more wonderful, and in spite of the cold air of the coming night, the villagers came out by the hundreds. We were presented with a brand new grass house, clean and sweet smelling. 6 strong Indian boys were assigned to be our servants. Inside our new home, we found a feast of fish and fruit. Long Arrow invited us to sit down and eat. We were all hungry, but were surprised and disappointed when we found out the fish was raw. The doctor apologized and explained to Long Arrow that we would prefer our fish cooked. Imagine our surprise when we learned that Long Arrow did not know what the word cooked meant. Polynesia pulled on the doctor's sleeve. You know what's wrong here, she observed. These people don't know how to make a fire. They have no fire. The doctor asked Long Arrow if he knew what fire was. Long Arrow said he had seen it coming from the top of volcanoes. He and the other Popsipetels did not know how it was made. No wonder the old chief died of cold, muttered Buppo. There was a crying sound at the door, and a weeping Indian mother carrying a baby said something to Long Arrow. He told the doctor the baby was sick and she wanted him to try and cure it. Just like Puddleby, Polynesia groaned, right in the middle of dinner. Well, at least here the food's raw, so it can't get cold. The doctor examined the baby and said it was thoroughly chilled. Fire, that's what the baby and the whole village needs. This child will get pneumonia if it isn't kept warm. But how do we make fire? Asked Long Arrow. We hunted through our pockets to see if any matches had survived the shipwreck. None had. There are ways to make fire without matches, the doctor said. One is with the strong glass and the rays of the sun. But since the sun is set, that is no good. Another is by grounding a hard stick into a soft log. Since the daylight is gone, we'll have to wait until morning to get the different wood, as well as an old squirrel's nest for fuel, the doctor said. But all fireless people can see in the dark, Long Arrow said. I will send a messenger, and we shall have a squirrel's nest within the hour. He gave an order to 2 of the servants, who ran out of the hut. In a very short time, a squirrel's nest, as well as both hard and soft woods, were brought to our door. The moon had not yet risen. It was pitch black within the house. I could feel and hear, though, that the Indians moved comfortably about, as though it were daylight. Using a bow, the doctor loosened the string, put the hard stick into a loop, and started grinding it into the soft wood of the log. Soon the smell of the smoking log filled the room. He kept feeding the part that was smoking with the inside lining of the squirrel's nest. He asked me to blow on it. He drilled the stick faster and faster. More smoke filled the room, and suddenly the darkness turned to light when the squirrel's nest burst into flame. The Indians murmured with astonishment. They fell on their knees. They wanted to touch it with their bare hands and play with it. We had to teach them how to use it. They were awed when we laid our fish across it on sticks and cooked it. They sniffed the air and smiled, and for the first time in history, the smell of fried fish passed through the village of Popsipetel. We asked them to bring piles and stacks of dry wood to the center of the main street, and we made an enormous bonfire. The whole tribe gathered around, smiling in wonder when they felt the warmth. When we had showed them how to handle the fire, the doctor said it could be taken into their houses if holes were made in the roofs to let out the smoke. And before we went to sleep, fires were going in every hut in the village. After that, the doctor was so popular that the crowds of admirers followed him wherever he went. After his fire making, they expected him to always do magic, and they didn't want to miss a thing. We escaped from the crowd that first morning and set out with Long Arrow to explore the island. We found that plants and trees were suffering from the cold. Animal life was in even worse shape. Shivering birds gathered together for flight to warmer lands. Many lay dead on the ground. Icebergs floated to the southeast, a sign that the island was not far from the Antarctic. Looking out to sea, we saw the porpoises. The doctor held them, and they came in to shore. The doctor explained that the island was floating southward when it belonged in a tropical zone. If it doesn't get warmer, everything will perish, he said. Well, said the porpoises, the whales could push it to a warmer climate, if you get enough of them. What a splendid idea. Do you think you could get me some? Certainly, said the porpoises. We passed a herd coming here. Thank you, said the doctor. You are always so kind. And then he asked if they knew how the island came to be a floating one. They said it used to be a mountainous corner of South America. Thousands of years ago, it had broken off from the mainland and got filled with air inside when it fell into the ocean. A huge air chamber, which ran right through the mountains, was what kept it floating. What a pecurious phenometer, Bumpo said. Indeed, agreed the doctor, taking out his notebook and jotting it down. The porpoises took off to find the whales and soon returned with at least 200 of them. They were enormous creatures. Here they are, said the porpoises. Good, said the doctor. Just explain to them how serious this is for all the living creatures of this land. Ask them to go to the far end of the island, put their noses against it, and push it back near the southern coast of Brazil. Soon the whales were thrashing through the sea to the south end of the island. We lay down on the beach and waited. And after about an hour, the doctor threw a stick into the water, and for a while it floated without moving, and soon we saw it begin to move gently down the coast. Thank goodness, the doctor said with a smile. The island is going north at last. Faster and faster we went, leaving the stick behind. Soon the icebergs grew dim along the skyline. The doctor threw more sticks in and looked at his watch. Good work, 14.5 knots an hour, a nice speed. We should be back near Brazil in about 5 days, he said. I feel warmer already. Let's go and get something to eat. On our way back to the village, an Indian runner came racing up with a message. Long Arrow listened gravely. He turned to the doctor and in the eagle tongue said, Great doctor, our neighbors to the south, the thievish Bag-Jagderags, are right now advancing to attack us. They want to steal our stores of ripe corn. Evil news to be sure, said the doctor, but maybe they are desperate for food because the frost killed their harvest. Make no excuses for the Bag-Jagderags, Long Arrow said. They are lazy. They would not dare to make war upon us except that they are a bigger tribe. The village was in a great state of excitement. Men were readying their bows, spears, and battle axes. Women were erecting a fence of high bamboo poles around the village. Scouts and messengers came and went with news of the enemy. The doctor said he would go to the enemy to try to make peace. War, he said, was a stupid, wasteful business, but the Indians said it was hopeless. The last messenger sent to try to make peace had been killed with an axe. Suddenly the lookout howled a cry of alarm. They're coming, swarming down the mountains in thousands. I don't believe in war, the doctor said, but if the village is attacked, we must defend it. He picked up a club. This seems like a pretty good tool, he said as he walked to the fence and took his place beside the other waiting fighters. Everyone got some kind of weapon to help the Popsipetels. I got a bow and arrow. Jip was relying on his strong teeth. Chi-Chi took a big bag of rocks into a tree to throw at the enemy's heads. Buppo marched after the doctor, armed with the young tree in one hand and a doorpost in the other. We gasped when we saw the size of the enemy. I'm going to get some help, Polynesia cried. She's gone to get the black parrots, Jip said. Let's hope she finds them in time. The village was completely surrounded within 15 minutes. Things happened so quickly that all I remember is, had it not been for the terrible three, as they came to be called, the war would have quickly been lost. Long Arrow, Buppo, and the doctor took their place in Popsipetel history that day. The enemy easily knocked down the bamboo fence, but then the doctor, Long Arrow, and Buppo began their attack. In spite of the odds, the enemy was thrown out. The strengths and weight of the three men from different lands, standing close together and swinging their enormous war clubs, was a sight of wonder. Many weeks later, while passing a campfire, I heard a song that has since become a traditional folk song of the Popsipetels, the Song of the Terrible Three. Seriously? Are you thinking you want me to sing this song? Here we go. Oh, hear ye the song of the terrible three, and the fight that they fought by the edge of the sea. Down from the mountains, the rocks and the crags, swarming like wasps, came the jagged rags. Surrounding our village, our walls they broke down. Oh, sad was the plight of our men in our town. But heaven determined our land to set free and sent us the help of the terrible three. Shoulder to shoulder they hammered and hit. Like demons of fury they kicked and they bit. Like a wall of destruction they stood in a row, flattening enemies 6 at a blow. And long shall we sing of the terrible three and the fight that they fought by the edge of the sea. Woohoo! Good singing, huh? Okay, here's the picture. And the picture says, The Terrible Three, from an Indian rock engraving found on Hawkshead Mountain, Spider Monkey Island. I thank you, kiddos. I'm going to take one more break, and then I'll finish the book. Okay? Break time.